Hey, deserving listeners, Jorge and Anfisa, let's watch.
You feel like you guys feeling awkward together, staying together in this room?
Very awkward. Hate it. I'm feeling pretty anxious for the tell-on.
I hope I won't get too mad this time.
Okay, so as you know, I realized that on Discovery Plus, they do the Journeys series where they will only show the clips of a particular couple, and I realized at a certain point that they weren't including the tell-alls, which doesn't make any sense. Although I guess it makes some sense because it'd be hard to extract just the moments when they are on screen because they're on screen most of the time. But I often will say that some pretty big things happen and are revealed during the tell-all. So I've been going back and watching the tell-all. So this is out of order, and this is the second tell-all that they were on after the first season of Happily Ever After that they were on.
1 minute she's happy, 1 minute she's mad.
Ooh. This was just the last thing, and I just told George to leave.
She kicked me out, broke my heart into a million pieces.
All right, so this tell-all is after that incident. That was the first time we saw her hit him. I think at this point she's already keyed the car. I don't know. I guess we'll figure out where they are in the timeline.
Whoa. Okay, let's talk about this. George, just so everybody knows, what is the status of the relationship now?
It's over.
Ooh.
Okay, but they get back together. I apologize if you know the whole timeline.
You came together, right? And you're sharing a hotel room right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because if it would have been bad and we would have came here on bad terms, she would have been scared to show up.
Yeah, he said that earlier. He said that he thought that she wouldn't want to come on the tell-all if he wasn't there with her. And then I was like, so what does that mean exactly? But it sounds like what I thought it meant, which is that he is seemingly altruistically helping her, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, not that I'm surprised. Well, there's a number of different things here. One is do we believe that he would be altruistic in that way? I don't know. But do we believe that for Anfisa, she has tremendous anxiety and would have a hard time coming on the tell-all and would need someone to be there with her to support her emotionally? Yeah, I do believe that. I imagine that she has a lot of anxiety. In fact, a lot of people with the kinds of personality issues that she presents with will come to therapy initially for anxiety. They will say, I have tremendous anxiety and I need help with that. And then when we start looking into things, we find that it's attachment, injury, relational traumas, personality disorder traits, perceptual distortions, the kind of things that I've been hypothesizing about, which is fine. In fact, I would say most of the people, if not all, that I eventually will hypothesize that they have a personality disorder did not come in saying that they have a personality disorder. They came in for some other reason. Other common presentations are, of course, relational distress, couple therapy, depression, substance abuse problems, that sort of thing.
I felt like I had to play a role to kind of calm things down.
What do you mean?
I think he means he was nice to me just, to make me come here today, because if he said whatever he's going to say today, I probably wouldn't show up.
Did you think things were getting better in the relationship?
I don't know. I think George just liked to play a victim.
So I will say that they're reminding me of a particular state that couples will come in to therapy presenting, which is a reserved state. I will see the couple come in and I'll say, how are things going? It's usually how I start the session with a couple. How things been since we last talked, or that sort of thing. And so there's usually kind of a check-in, and then if they present something that is obvious that we're going to work on, then we will work on that. If they don't, then at some point, if they're checking in and they seem to be just telling me surface level information about their week, then I will explicitly say something like, maybe within the first few minutes, so what would you like to work on today? That kind of thing. I always want to know what clients want to work on, and if it's not obvious, then I ask. And I recommend that all therapists do that. It's a reasonable question that we would ask. And if you're a client, you should always, it's a part of the working alliance, the therapeutic alliance, that is crucial to positive outcomes in therapy. That you and the therapist, the client and the therapist, both understand exactly what you're trying to achieve, or roughly what you're trying to achieve, and how you are going to try to achieve that. So if you're a client and you don't know exactly what your therapist is doing or why, or you don't know if your therapist understands what you're actually there to do, what you're trying to accomplish, or if you as a client don't even really know what you're trying to accomplish, you should actually ask your therapist to help you explore that. Therapists are trained and should be adept at being able to help you clarify. Because, sometimes people just come in and say, my life is a train wreck. I don't know where to begin. Or I just know that things aren't right, and I don't know what's wrong. Is it me? Is it other people? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What can therapy offer me? And so as a therapist, I can help to explore that. I could say, well, here's what therapy can do, and given what you're saying, these are some ideas. What do you want to do? And let's try to collaborate on some goals here. But anyway, so what I will see is that the couple will sit down, and I will say, how are things going? And they'll both just kind of look at each other and be quiet and reserved, and they'll say like, well, I don't know. And it's usually because they're afraid of talking at the risk of entering into a big conflict. They might have begun this mode days earlier because they had a huge blow up, and they consider the lesser of two evils to just be to refrain from talking and interacting altogether, because if they open up, they're terrified that things are going to go horribly wrong. And so it kind of looks like that, right?
I don't know. I think George just liked to play a victim. I might not be the nicest person in the world, but I've always been honest with my intentions. I am who I am.
Yeah, her face. It's something that we will hear abusive people say, is they say, look, I'm just being honest. At least I'm honest with my intentions, and I am who I am. This is the way that things are. Now, on one hand, you could see that as psychopathic or narcissistic, self-centered, in that, they're exhibiting entitlement. It's just like, look, I can treat people the way I want to treat people, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And there's certainly people like that, but more often those statements, and I think for Anfisa, she's in this category, those statements come from a place of shame, actually, and a place of frustration for them. So often what will happen with people is they will have this overreactivity, and afterward, there will be a part of them that will be ashamed of themselves. They'll feel guilty. But because they lack attachment security and modeling and all the things that I've been talking about with this couple, they don't acknowledge it to their partner, or they barely acknowledge it to their partner. Or let's say that they do. Let's say they stretch and they're like, you know what, I was a jerk before and I'm going to try not to do it again. But they repeatedly overreact because they're not in treatment and they don't know what's going on with them. There's a part of them believes that they're totally righteous in having that reactivity because it feels so bad to them. That's the important thing to know about personality disorders, is it's generated from an emotional state that is exaggerated or abnormal. It's the disordered part of the disorder, which is that something's happening and they perceive it in a way that provokes tremendous amount of anxiety and hurt and pain. And then all of their behavior generates from that feeling, and they feel totally righteous in attacking you because of how hurt they feel, but they think that you did that to them, when in reality you just happened to step on a landmine that triggered them and triggered their complex PTSD or their relational traumas growing up. And so that's why they had all those feelings. Anyway, so they will often be ashamed of themselves, particularly because they were treated poorly when they were growing up. They have a pretty big part of themselves that believes that they're defective, that, deeply defective, that there's something deeply wrong with them. So they will sometimes say like, yeah, I think there's something wrong with me, at least internally. And they will try to change, again, without therapy, and they will fail, and they'll try to change, and they'll fail, and they'll try to change, and they will fail. And this could go on daily for years. So just imagine that for some of you who have tried to recover from addiction, you know how that can feel. It's demoralizing, without any kind of guidance or treatment or something. You're just in your head. And so you'll hear statements that people will make after a while of that process. They will say things like, well, first off, they'll say things like, I'm broken and I'm empty and there's something deeply wrong with me. And they will say things like this, where it's just like, look, it is what it is. Because they are pleading with their attachment figures, with their attachment relationships, to not leave them. And so they've tried to change. That didn't work. And so they're, in a way, they're trying to create this expectation of, look, that's just going to happen. This is going to, and I think Anfisa has even kind of directly said that to George at times. But you'll hear people say things like something I heard a client say once years ago. She was just like, you know what, I can just be a B word sometimes. And that's just how it is. And after a while of treatment, we realized that she had resorted to that narrative and that statement as a way of just trying to cope with the failure that she had experienced while trying to change. And she was trying to signal to other people, like, look, I can enter into a mode, which will involve me being very mean to you, and just don't take it personally, but just know that that's just the way that it is. It's just who I am. But then when we go through treatment, we can actually address it so they don't have to do that. So it kind of sounds like that. But I don't know. I mean, she could be coming from a purely narcissistic, psychopathic place. It's hard to tell. Meaning that the person does not care about other people. So it's really important to understand those two, because usually we'll assume the former. When we hear things like that, we'll assume that the person is psychopathic, that they lack empathy, that they can only see their own needs and wants. And those people do exist, and so that it could generate from that. But for the vast majority of people, when they make statements like that, it's coming from a different place. They actually really do care about other people's feelings, but they feel powerless over their own reactivity. And so one of the defenses against that is just to try to set the expectation that please don't leave me because of this part of me. Please get used to it. And if I just say it's just a part of me and it's normal, then maybe people won't leave me and maybe you won't be as hurt.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual. Navigating all the various challenges we face can make you feel unsure or stuck in place. Whether it's a relationship, or going through grief, or considering a new career. And, generally speaking, a therapist can really help with that, by helping you to explore your feelings, and by giving you the space to clarify what you want to do. In my life, I can't imagine where I'd be without the therapy I've had. During some of the biggest moments of my life, therapists have been there for me, to slow me down, to listen to me, to help me explore. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Kirk. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
And when I came to the United States, I figured out that he was not who he pretended to be, but he still tries to play a victim.
George, you say that you're either divorcing or you're going to start the process for an annulment.
I haven't started it yet.
What would be the basis of an annulment?
Sham marriage.
What?
A what? He's saying a sham marriage. Based on what? Do you feel she just wanted her green card?
She told me herself that she's waiting for the 2 years. That's what she's waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise us, right? And it's interesting that there will be this reaction from the Americans, because it's just like, what's it to you? You can break up and she could stay in the States or not. She should be able to do that. But I don't think I included it, but earlier he said that he wanted to get back at her. So it's that revenge impulse, which is normal to feel, but I don't recommend that people act on that.
So what are you talking about?
Okay, we're going to come back to this in just a second. I want to ask, Danielle, you had tried to get an annulment, but you found out that the bar is pretty high for an actual annulment.
Oh, so this is the one with Danielle. I think this is the one where Muhammad shows up and they have the talk about the smell. Anyway, I won't rewatch that again because I've already watched it and reacted to it.
That's kind of not true. I do care about materialistic things.
That's not true? Then why do you want to wait for 2 years then?
They're talking to me right now, not to you. So I do care about materialistic things. And I expected I'm gonna have a nice life. We're gonna have a good marriage, you know.
And he knew that though. He knew that you wanted that, right?
Yeah. And I wanted to stay married. I wanted to have kids with him, but also I wanted a good lifestyle. And if he can't provide it, then.
Anfisa, why don't you go out and get a job? It's 2017.
All right, well, it was that 2017. Wow, this is a long time ago. 5, 6 years ago. My goodness, I didn't realize it was that long ago. Wow. For y'all watching this, you're just like, you probably barely remember this scene. That's interesting.
He said he didn't want me to get a job.
I never said that.
You want a wife to stay at home. That was your words.
Wait, Anfisa, let me just ask you a quick question. If it was between George and another man who said that he had more money, who would you choose?
Depends how that man treat me.
You're such a bitch.
You know, she's drawing conclusions from watching the show, I presume. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons why someone would judge Anfisa, certainly. But the way Anfisa answered the question, I think, makes sense, right? It's like, well, depends on how the person treats, but, you know, depends on the quality of the relationship, that sort of thing.
Seriously, you're like a serious gold digger. And people who are in love...
No, she said depends on how the other man is going to treat her.
He treated her like a princess. Honey, I know. I have been through this multiple times. Here's the thing. People who are really in love deserve to be together. And it's because of people like you guys that we can't be together. And we fight so hard to be together. And you guys
stop cursing, please?
Yeah, I'll hear people say that sometimes in the comments section, that individuals that are scamming ruin it for everyone else because the government is trying to catch the scammers, right? The fraudulent relationships. And it's a really difficult process. We've been watching Libby and Andre and Libby, right? That they're going through a lot of difficulties in terms of, as of this week, the episode in which they were trying to get permanent residency. I don't know the exact term, but there's a chance that they're going to get that he's going to have to move back to Moldova, and that the whole family's going to have to go anyway. So there's, you know, naturally there's a lot of anger at people who are ruining it for everyone else. Yeah. Now, do I believe that Anfisa and Mohammed were scamming? I don't know. It's hard to tell. There's evidence that Mohammed was, right? There was evidence that Mohammed was Mohammed and Eve, right? Anfisa, though, my hypothesis is that she actually deeply, deeply wants a secure relationship with someone. And I think I don't know if I've said this before, but I would imagine that for her, she tried to find secure attachments when she was younger up until this point. She's pretty young now, right? Or like early 20s or something. And it didn't work out. And so she thought, well, maybe if I can play to my strengths, because she thinks that I don't know, this is complete speculation, but that there's something wrong with her, and that's why things aren't working out with other people. Perhaps. I don't know. That's usually at the core of these kinds of personality conditions. And then she thinks, well, if I can play to my strengths, like my looks, then and find someone that only wants me for my looks, then maybe that will be more secure and the person won't leave me. Then she kind of goes into that world, and, you know, and that's interesting to think about because it's probably a whole world, right? There's probably a whole internet community because how did they meet, right? Did they meet on one of those kind of sites where American men will meet women from abroad, and who knows what's kind of in that circle and what is rewarded and what is not. Anyway, I don't know. So she might have resorted to that consciously, but really deep down, she wants a secure attachment and is terrified of being rejected. And so she comes out because of that, but unconsciously, as a way of trying to avoid her vulnerability, she keeps talking about how she's just in it for the money and the green card. But really, out of everyone in there, she might be more emotionally involved and desperate for closeness than anyone in there because of the things I've been hypothesizing about. Now, it doesn't make any of her behavior okay. It doesn't make her gold-digging behavior okay. I just typically, I don't see people that way. You know, there's a tendency that people will, especially in narratives like this show, they'll just say like, oh, that person's a gold digger, that person's a narcissist, that person's, you know, this and that. And in my experience, you know, those people exist for sure, but in my experience, it's much more fundamental. And those kinds of personas people put on, it's defensive.
I'm allowed to do whatever I want. Yes. Well, you guys make the K-1 visa process look like a joke, and a green card process have such a stigma. We fought. We were denied 2 times. I'm not talking to you.
Like
blame Americans. Americans do it.
Talk about your experience.
Why aren't you blaming them?
I'm speaking to everybody. We worked too hard to be together. We were denied 2 times.
Yeah, and she mentioned the stigma as well, that if you mention that you're going through a K-1 process or that you are, I can't remember what, this would have been years ago. A friend of mine was dating, an American friend of mine was dating someone from Russia, and another friend of mine just chimed in and said something like, well, I can't remember exactly how it went down, but I heard something along the lines of, oh, they're probably just in it for the money or something like that. And I was like, how do you know that? Is it just assumed that's, yeah. So for her, she might have experienced that stigma of just like, you know, he doesn't really love you, right? He's just in it for the green card. So she's upset about that stigma, and she identifies Anfisa and Muhammad as possible reasons as to why that stigma exists. All right, well, let's end it there. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.